Welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series, your resource for the latest news and updates on pressing issues facing the accounting profession.
Good afternoon and welcome to the AICPA Town Hall Series. I'm Eric Auskerson, one of your hosts for today. It's great to be with you. Last time we were with you, we were live in Las Vegas. And what I'd like to share with you right now is just what is the basic strategy related to the Town Hall Series. It's all about bringing you timely, critical information, interpreting it in real time. As you know, we always do. We bring you the best available information based on our discussions with all of these different stakeholders. We then put together strategies and capabilities. And this has really become a very important hour that we spend with you twice a month. We heard from so many of you at Engage in Las Vegas on what an important part of your practice or your company the AICPA Town Hall Series has become. So here's a picture of us in Vegas. We are going to do more of these live town halls as we have events around the country. So more of this to come, and we're going to be doing a live event actually at the end of September in New York. So here's our agenda for today. We're going to start off with a legislative update. A lot happening in Washington, D.C. And then Lisa Simpson's going to provide the latest on PPP guidance, ERC. A lot of guidance has come out recently. And we've got a special section, deep dive related to single audits, an important topic. And then we're actually going to get into some workplace management techniques, bringing in a best-in-class expert to walk us through that. So here's the lineup. We will introduce them as they join us. And who I want to introduce first is Lauren Pfingstang, who is part of the advocacy team in Washington, D.C. She works very closely with Mark Peterson, and you know Mark well. Mark's off this week. So Lauren, it's great to have you with us. And we've got plenty to talk about as we see here in the news. A lot of discussions around this infrastructure bill that just was passed by the Senate and this budget resolution. So I think you're going to be giving us a course here and on how bills and budget resolutions and reconciliations happen in Congress. So I'll let you take this away. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you, Eric. Glad to be here. And to say that a lot is happening in the Senate is an understatement. So let's start with the infrastructure bill. We've been keeping close tabs on the Senate's bipartisan infrastructure bill for a few reasons, but the most important reason right now is that we always knew that the Senate passage of a bipartisan infrastructure deal was politically necessary for leadership to be able to proceed to a reconciliation bill. And that's the bill that's going to address the administration's soft or human infrastructure priorities. And it's also going to be where all of the major tax changes are housed this year. So understanding how the Senate bill came together and what its points of tension were are really, really important for understanding how that fall-winter reconciliation and tax bill could play out. So on Tuesday, we saw that the Senate kind of defied the odds. They passed the infrastructure bill by a vote of 69 to 30. And I want to talk about the major takeaways and what they mean for reconciliation. So the first major takeaway is that the success of the Senate infrastructure deal was a story about the power of Democratic moderates right now. Senator Sinema and Senator Manchin, their power in a 50-50 Senate cannot be overstated. This bill would not have happened without them, and they are going to have huge influence on the scope and the size of the reconciliation bill. Now, when you look at the House, you see that House Democrats only have a 3-seat majority, and that gives the bloc of moderates in that chamber a lot of leverage that so far they haven't used. And these moderates want two things. The first thing they want is a vote on the Senate infrastructure deal as quickly as possible. And second, they want to shrink the size of the reconciliation bill, which right now could contain as much as $3.5 trillion in spending and tax cut initiatives.
Well, Lauren, when you look at this, I mean, the infrastructure bill, it's big. It's $1 trillion. Everything's got to be $1 trillion or more now in DC. And it seems like this worked the way, things maybe used to work, compromise and discussions between both parties. When you look at the infrastructure bill, how likely do you think it is that the House Democrats will be able to force a vote and maybe get this thing done, who knows, by middle of September?
That's a great question, Eric. 2 days ago, I would have said it looks pretty likely. They've got that block, they've got some power. Yesterday, Speaker Pelosi reiterated what she's been saying for a long time, which is she is making this one big bill. And that's kind of the second takeaway, is that as much as House Democratic moderates would like to force a vote, perhaps in late August, early September, they're not going to be able to, because if they put that bill up for a vote right now, it would fail. House progressives would vote against it. They are insisting that both of these bills, the infrastructure and the reconciliation bill, be tied together. And so that's kind of the second takeaway, is that this is just one big moving vehicle, even though it seems like it's on a two-track process. And the open question here is this going to happen in August, September, October, November? I will say this: if there is a vote on infrastructure in the House in August or September, it means that those moderates got what they wanted, but they've also made ironclad promises to Speaker Pelosi that they're going to vote for whatever reconciliation bill the Senate comes up with. And I think the third, takeaway from the infrastructure bill is that there's a newfound comfort with spending big. Eric, you said $1 trillion. Newfound comfort with spending big and with deficit spending. I think it was 72 hours before the Senate actually had its vote on the infrastructure bill. The CBO came out and said that it was going to add $256 billion to the deficit over 10 years. That's a number that would usually make a lot of Democratic moderates pause, and this time it didn't. Now, when you look at the reconciliation bill, the Senate reconciliation instructions would allow deficits to increase by as much as $1.75 trillion over 10 years. And Democrats are going to get scared by that number. And so they're going to try and work to bring the overall size of the bill down. And the last thing I'll mention about infrastructure, and it's not really a takeaway, it's just more interesting, is crypto was the big story coming out of that bill. No one expected that. I think tax offsets for that bill were supposed to be minimal to non-existent. And honestly, no one really thought that the proposals on crypto and tax and reporting were ready for prime time. But Senate negotiators were scrambling at the last minute for ways to pay for the bill, and they threw this new provision in there, and it got messy, and it has not been fixed.
Yeah, when you think about just kind of getting, sometimes it happens. They shoehorned in. A lot of people are looking at crypto assets. All kinds of things occurring with run-ups and prices, and just people worrying if the compliance is actually happening. But when you look at legislation like this, it's gotten so specific, and the question is, do they really know? The senators have a good grasp on crypto and blockchain to get as specific as they did in this infrastructure bill?
I think Senator Ted Cruz said he doesn't think, I don't think there's but 5 senators in the institution that actually know what a digital asset is. So you were throwing very new information at a bunch of members who really didn't know how to interpret the language. And that was what made, I think, part of this really messy. So the infrastructure bill cleared the Senate, and now the Senate immediately turned to the fiscal year 2022 budget resolution, and that passed early Wednesday morning on a party line vote. And usually the world yawns if and when Congress actually passes a budget resolution. But this year's budget resolution is important because it contains those reconciliation instructions, and those instructions are the key to unlocking a privileged reconciliation bill. I cannot emphasize enough the next point. We are at the beginning of this process, right? Passing a budget resolution with instructions is just a blueprint for a future reconciliation bill. And reconciliation itself is really complicated and kind of hard to explain. And so what I say is, choosing to use reconciliation is like choosing to get into the express lane on a highway. You might get to your final destination a little bit faster, but you're going to miss some exits. You may have to pay more money in tolls, and you're probably going to blow a tire speeding on the way. And how this procedure is being used now to speed through major legislation on simple majority votes is not how it was originally intended to be used. And that's important to know because, it's what congressional historian Rich Ehrenberg refers to as the weaponization of procedure. And that's the increasing tendency of both parties in Congress to use whatever procedural tools at hand to get some short-term partisan gain. And right now, reconciliation is that weaponized procedure. And I think what's difficult for everyone, for practitioners, for taxpayers, for business leaders, is when this weaponization creates extreme change on the same general set of policies, like tax, in a short period of time. And I know a lot of people wish that the way that the infrastructure bill worked out, where it was 2 parties negotiating in good faith, compromising, I think they wish that was how Congress always operated.
Yeah, well, I think, one thing, if you're clicking on your CPE, attendance checks, you're getting CPE and you deserve CPE because you're learning a lot about how government works here, from Lauren. I mean, I think this is, I remember last August when we were talking about, it's a question of when, not if, related to the next phase of PPP. And then it didn't happen until December. This probably isn't a question of when, of when. There's still a chance that this may not happen in its current shape, but it sounds like this is definitely going to take some time. One thing that there's a lot of discussion around is the debt limit, and it was 10 years ago, where we had a lot of shutdowns and debt limit standoffs. What do you think is going to happen here?
I would watch that debate closely. Congressional leaders have played this game of chicken before. They're playing it now. If the game goes on for too long and the threat of defaulting isn't resolved, that could really have serious implications for the US and for world markets. And that's one of the obstacles that I think, the House and the Senate are going to face as they try to move the infrastructure bill and the reconciliation bill forward is, the House is going to come back August 23rd. They're going to pass the budget resolution, and then they're going to be able to start packaging together a reconciliation bill. But if the Senate comes back in mid-September, they don't really have the time to start a reconciliation. They've got to address the debt limit. They've got to fund the government. So that could push both infrastructure and reconciliation further into the fall. And the other obstacles I'll bring up are, COVID. If something gets worse with COVID, particularly for small businesses, you could see some more negotiations around another small business relief package, maybe not on its own, but slipped into a larger package. And then something that a lot of people are paying attention to is that newly extended CDC eviction moratorium. It ends the night of October 3rd. And that's right around the same time when we're having to address funding the government, the debt limit, reconciliation. So that's something to watch. And last, I'll talk about just briefly the content in, a reconciliation bill. And I'll say this is a one-party exercise, right? This is partisan. So the question that we should all be thinking about is, what can the Democrats all agree on? And you have to remember that moderates have so much power right now, particularly in the Senate, and they've been shaping some of the early discussions over what should the corporate tax rate be and should we eliminate stepped-up basis. And so what that tells us is this is not going to be a complete reconfiguration of the tax code or the tax system. So the top issues I'd say we should all be watching are, what are we going to do, or what is Congress going to do on the top marginal income tax rate? The Biden administration wants it to go almost up to 40%. I don't think a lot of folks are going to fight that. Corporate tax rate, Senator Manchin has already said he doesn't want to go beyond 25%. But we also know that the CBO tells us that increasing the corporate rate by just 1 percentage point raises an additional $100 billion in new revenue. That's something that's easily understood by members and the public. And so if, the writers of the reconciliation bill need revenue, it's pretty easy to go from 25% to 26% and sell it to the public. Obviously, we're going to keep an eye on proposed elimination of the stepped-up basis for gains of $1 million. You've already seen moderate Democrats who have farmers in their districts, make some noise about that. Taxing long-term capital gains, the same as ordinary income. I think the threat of retroactivity is the thing to watch on that issue. The Section 199A, 20% deduction, and then IRS tax enforcement. There was a reporting requirement for financial institutions that fell out of the infrastructure bill, and it will absolutely be part of the reconciliation bill this fall or winter.
Well, that's a great concluding summary there, Lauren, because a lot of the firms right now, and members and companies need to kind of give advice to others and to their clients and to their companies on what does this mean for us. And so these tax provisions clearly are things that people are looking at. So what they need to state to their clients is still a long ways to go.
Mm-hmm.
And you've got it, as you said, it's a budget resolution. It's not a bill. So in the budget resolution, you have some proposals. We'll keep watching it. Obviously, the AICPA advocacy team is gonna continue with their leadership voice there. So anything else you just want is people are trying to think through this, leave them with maybe a couple of strategy concepts for them to leverage with their clients?
I'd say look out for 3 names. It's Wyden, Biden, and Neal. These are the folks that are going to have the most influence, along with the moderates, on shaping what a final tax bill looks like. So watch what they say. Watch what they're doing legislatively. They're putting down bills to kind of shape the reconciliation bill markers. So I'd pay attention to those three folks.
All right. Well, thanks, Lauren. Look forward to having you back on the town hall sometime soon. And thanks for all of your leadership there in DC. So with that, we're going to go right into Lisa Simpson's technical update. So welcome, Lisa.
Thanks, Eric. We've got a lot to talk about, and I know most of you want to hit on ERC, so let's dive in and get going on that one. You should have gotten an email that talks about the new guidance that came out from the IRS. We got a notice on August 4th, and then a notice just this week, August 10th. So our tax team, Chris Esposito from the advocacy team, April Walker from the tax practice and ethics team, recorded a video that does a deep dive into both of these notices. But the good news is we finally got some answers to those questions you were asking. It's a mixed bag. Some are good, and some will need a little bit of processing to wrap your head around. But let's get started. So one of the questions that we got a definitive answer on was, are wages paid to a majority shareholder or their spouse qualified wages? The answer is it depends, and it depends on some complicated attribution rules. We're not going to go through those today because they're a little messy and confusing, but Chris and April have discussed them in detail on the videos, and I'll give you a link on the next slide if you did not get the Town Hall newsletter to tell you about those. Our tips qualified wages, cash tips of $20 or more can be considered qualified wages if they meet other requirements. Is employer size based on full-time employees or full-time equivalents? And the answer is that it's based on full-time employees. So that should be good news to a lot of employers who are hoping to use the different rules for based on size standards. What is the timing of recognizing the qualified wage deduction? It goes back to the period when the wages were incurred. So it's not when you filed for the credit, it's not when you received the credit, it's when were the wages incurred. So again, Chris and April will discuss that in their video to give you some more insights on that. Another big question that we got answers to that were favorable is, do gross receipts include PPP, SVOG, RRF, PPP forgiveness, SVOG, RRF? And the answer is it depends on which way you want to go with that. The IRS has given a very generous safe harbor that says the borrower can elect to exclude those as long as as long as the filer is consistent in how they use the methodology and applies it across related organizations. So again, details in the videos. Also got definitions around recovery startup business and severely financially distressed employers. So the resources that you're going to need are the video that Kristen and April did, and you'll see the link on the next slide. And they also did a podcast, so you can listen to this while you're out walking if you'd prefer. But I'd recommend the recording simply because you're going to get slides that you can see as they're walking through the examples around those complicated family attribution rules. We've also got some tax advisor articles and Journal of Accountancy articles that I've given you links to. And as a reminder, we have an ERC resource hub. They will keep processing through the new guidance that came out and updating those resources on a regular basis. But please do make sure that you check out the AICPA TV recording. I'm seeing lots of questions come in asking about the family attribution rules. So I'm just going to refer you to that video because they'll go through those examples for you.
And Lisa, one thing, both of us are on lots of calls with firms as they continue to advance both their PPP and ERC strategies. And one thing we said for 2021, PPP forgiveness applications, it made sense to wait to understand this additional guidance. Now we've got the additional guidance. I think you still may want to wait a little while. And what we're going to do in September is put together a panel of practitioners that will tell you how they're executing on this and working through a lot of the questions that are coming in right now.
Yeah, which is a great segue to this page. So we did get new updated forgiveness stats, and I think the trend lines are very positive. So as of July 30, you can see that 5 million loan numbers have applied, representing about $470 billion. 441 billion has been forgiven, another 29 billion in process. So that leaves 6.5 million applications that have not yet been filed. We do know that a significant number of those 2020 loans are at the point where payments are being required. I've given you a link to the IFR that basically says if a borrower has to start making payments before they've applied for forgiveness, and then they ultimately get full forgiveness or whatever the decision is, any overpayments will be refunded.
So, Lisa, when I look at this slide, what it says to me is there's pressure on the 15% of the 2020 loans. Some of those may have occurred in June, so you might have some time, but there's clearly some of those that were probably in April or May. So payments are becoming due. As we all know, deadlines matter. So some of these clients may have been procrastinating. So that's when you look at 2020. Then if you look at the dollar amount, you see 470 billion. So well over half, and we still have I think a lot of the smaller applications from 2021 that you don't need to process. We were talking about from the other day, they'd done all 40 of their 2021 loans. Not needed, but they've done it. What we continue to think about is your overall practice strategy related to forgiveness. Is really important, and we know a lot of firms for 2021 that are waiting till September and October.
Yeah, absolutely. So we did get a deep data dump, and you've got a link to it there on the slide. But I wanted to call out this set of data in particular because this is for 2020 and 2020 loans, or 21 loans in total. And basically the highlight is loan forgiveness is coming in at over 99% through July 31, 2021. So great results. It goes back to what Eric and I have been talking about for the last year and a half. Assume positive intent and, just comply with what the program was about, which was maintaining payroll. As a reminder, please download the slides. They're in your resource material. So go to your resources, download the slides. These are a PDF in your materials, and you'll have access to all of the hyperlinks that we embed into the presentation for you. All right, so we got a new IFR that came out July 28th. So just after the town hall that we did in Vegas, we got a new IFR, but we didn't do a special edition because this is what we'd been talking to you about. The SBA announced officially that they were going to launch their direct forgiveness portal. As a reminder, the lenders have to opt in to use the portal. And as Eric has mentioned on our previous conversations, we believe that most national large lenders will continue to use their own platforms. They've already invested in their platforms, and they want to control the member experience to make sure that it's a good experience for their clients. It is only for borrowers of $150,000 or less. The way the process works is that the borrower will log into the system using some two-factor authentication and submit their application for forgiveness. The SBA will weigh in on it and basically tell the lender what the SBA thinks the decision should be. The lender will agree or disagree, and then it'll go back through the process. Borrower will be notified, lender will get paid, and the loan is forgiven. One of the interesting things about second draw loans is that they will be, a COVID reduction score will be applied to their forgiveness applications if they did not provide proof of the revenue decline for that second draw loan when they made their loan application. So the SBA has contracted with Dun & Bradstreet to leverage this COVID impact score. And basically, if the COVID impact score is met, no additional documentation around the revenue decline will be required. The good news is that even if a lender decides not to use the direct forgiveness portal for all of their loans under $150,000, they can still access that score. So that's the IFR. Then we got a new FAQ that came out. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. I skipped a component of the IFR, and it's good news. If a borrower has applied for forgiveness, does not agree with the SBA's decision, and has filed an appeal, now under this IFR that came out July 28, the payment process is deferred. So good news there for borrowers as they're working through the appeal process. Then we got the FAQ that I jumped the gun on. So basically, as we talked about several weeks ago, the SBA has decided to withdraw the loan necessity questionnaires, 3509 and 3510. There's a very long answer as to why, but I wanted to just pull out the highlights. And basically, they're saying that they were having a negative impact on forgiveness applications. I think they were certainly causing a lot of anxiety and hindering borrowers from applying. So their data suggests that it's not needed, and they've withdrawn them. So that means that they have also removed the instruction. They've changed the instructions and the actual $2 million and above question on the face of all of the forgiveness forms. So you won't see that anymore. They also added a couple of lines. One is for the amount of any PPP loan increases and the date of any PPP loan increases. So nothing too earth-shattering, but again, good news. So if we switch over to Shuttered Venue Operator Grant, there is some news that came out just yesterday. If you have any clients who have been considering whether or not to apply, they need to get moving on it. The application will close officially a week from tomorrow. The SBA still has plenty of money available in the program. So they are looking at the supplemental grants that we discussed a couple of weeks ago. They do not have the details released on that. So we'll keep you posted on that. There were about 3,000 loan or grant applications that were denied by the SBA for SVOG, and they have created an appeals process. But it's basically the SBA reaching out to the applicants who have been denied and creating an appeal process for that. And so we'll see how that goes. There was a lot of data released this week on Shuttered Venue Grants, so I'll leave that there for you. Links to the data are in the top of the slide there. But I think it's really interesting. Of the 10,000 or so grants awarded, 7,000 have 10 or fewer employees. So this money is reaching those smaller, deeply affected organizations. Some news on the accounting front is that the AICPA, working with their volunteers, have released a technical question and answer around related accounting for RRF and SVOG. So I've given you the link there. I think the concepts will be very familiar to you. And so you've got what you need there. If you look at the next slide, they give you some of the analogies that you can use as you're trying to figure out which method seems to make the most sense. So that is it, I think, for my component of the technical update, but I'm really happy to bring in Mary Folster, who's the Senior Director of our Governmental Audit Quality Center. You've seen Mary before on these town halls. We've been getting so many questions about single audits, provider relief funds in particular. So she's going to give us a good update on that. Thank you, Mary, for joining us.
Great. Thank you for having me today. So before we jump in, just to make sure we're all on the same page about what a single audit is, single audit is basically for entities that expend $750,000 or more of federal funds. Typically, they're state governments, local governments, not-for-profit organizations. What we've been finding with the pandemic funding is that sometimes for-profit entities are being asked to have these types of audits. And once you're doing one of these, the auditor is giving an opinion on compliance with a compliance requirement that the government has identified as being subject to audit for the program, things that are very important to them. They're highly specialized engagements, so I would just have a word of caution for everyone watching today that if you haven't done one of these before, it's probably a good idea for you to think about whether you want to partner with another firm that's done that kind of work before, or certainly if you're going to do it and haven't done one before, you're definitely going to need to get training before you get too far underway. If we could switch to the next slide. This is just showing you the different buckets of the largest COVID funding programs that have been issued to date. A new one since the last time I met with you is the Coronavirus State and Local Fiscal Recovery Fund, $350 billion. And that money is going from the largest state governments in the country all the way down to thousands of small units of local government. And I will say that if you're auditing not-for-profits, it is possible that they could get some of this funding through a governmental entity. The second largest program is the Education Stabilization Fund. It has received more money through the American Rescue Plan and then some legislation back in December. So it's now the second largest program at $278 billion, going to institutions of higher education primarily and K through 12 institutions. Then we have the Provider Relief Fund, and I have included a few detailed slides on this. This is probably one of the more challenging programs I've ever been around in my years of being involved in single audits. $175 billion to healthcare providers, governments, not-for-profits, and for-profits. And then finally, the Coronavirus Relief Fund, $150 billion, primarily to states and local governments. Again, though, that funding could have been passed through to not-for-profits. I will just say that this funding, as it's being introduced into entities that typically do have federal funds, it's changing the composition of the programs that auditors will need to look at during the course of the audit. And I can say that I was thinking about this the other day. The Washington Post runs a kind of a what's in and what's out every year. And if I were to say what's in last year, this year, and probably for the next couple of years in the future, single audit is going to be on that list. So let's go ahead and move to the next slide. So breaking news items. Tomorrow, the OMB compliance supplement is going to be issued. We just got notification of that in a notice from OMB today. And you should be looking for a Governmental Audit Quality Center alert for that information. Similar to last year, a follow-up addendum will be issued, and we've been getting word that there may actually be 2 addendum. There is also going to be new guidance in this supplement on higher risk programs, trying to have the auditor focus in on some of the programs that are higher risk. And I have a list of those on the next slide. This, again, will affect major program determination. And then for PRF, the first single audits that are actually going to include PRF funding are for June 30, 2021 year ends. This has just been clarified by HHS over the course of the last month or so. And so that does supersede guidance previously that said that 12/31/20 year end single audits would include PRF funds. And then again, we just think there's going to be a lot of new single audits as a result of all of this. So on the higher risk designation, I won't read these to you, but you can check the supplement tomorrow. These are the programs that we believe will be identified as higher risk, and they are including all of the programs that were on the earlier page with the blocks. If you could switch to the next slide. PRF amounts to be reported on the SEPA have been clarified, and basically, the big news here, as I mentioned, was that they've clarified what goes on the schedule of expenditures of federal awards. So for June 30, 2021 year ends, the total expenditures and lost revenues from the period 1 report that's filed with HHS is going to be what appears on the schedule. And you can see for 12/31/21 through June 29th, 2022 year ends, for those schedules, the entity is going to include period 1 and period 2 reporting into HHS. So what I would say is if we want to figure out what those periods are, let's go ahead and look at the next slide. So period 1, which will be what goes on these June 30, 2021 schedules of expenditures, are going to be payment received periods from April 2020 through June 30, 2020. Okay, and that would be, again, expenditures and lost revenues associated with that period. That would be what ends up going on the CFA. And I mentioned for the 1231s, it would include periods 1 and periods 2. So I won't read this all the way to you, but I will just point out that this information and the last slide information will be in the compliance supplement that OMB is releasing tomorrow. So it is official. To the next slide, please. We get this question a lot. Some entities have fully expended their PRF funds, perhaps though it extended out beyond that period 1. And they just want to know, in that case, can they just put everything in, get it on the CFA, and have a single audit and be done with it? And the answer to that question is no. The way that HHS has set this up, the entities and the auditors have to follow those schedules that I just mentioned. So a June 30, 2021 year end, if all of its expenditures and lost revenues related to that first period, maybe they're lucky and they're okay. If they didn't, they're going to have to wait until June 30, 2022 to catch up and finish that single audit, or the rest of the funding in a single audit. If we switch to the next slide, has the GAQC gotten any more clarity around the audit requirements for for-profit entities receiving PRF? And the answer to that is there still is uncertainty around the for-profit requirements. HHS is going to be requiring for-profit entities that have 750,000 or more to get either a single audit or a financial audit under government auditing standards. So they have clarified, and one of the questions we've been trying to get answers to relates to whether the 750,000 is expenditures or receipts, and it is expenditures. You can see with the FAQ link there that they have clarified that. And basically, we are still working with HHS as they develop guidance on these engagements. So I think the strong recommendation from the Quality Center is that you hold off on doing any of these for-profit engagements. HHS is making their way towards issuing more guidance for for-profits, and we do think it will be coming in the near term. So just watch the Quality Center's website, and we'll give you as much information as we can. To the next slide. How to learn more on PRF. Here's an alert link. We also have links to the HHS reporting page. Very importantly, there's a 1-hour web event on August 18th. Basically, you can access registration information there. And on the supplement itself, I just want to point out that we do have a no CPE archive of the supplement webcast on our GAQC website. And we will be rebroadcasting that for CPE on August 31st. So we just did that last week. It's very up to date, and I would encourage those of you doing single audits to take a look at it. And then lastly, just a quick plug for the Governmental Audit Quality Center. If you're doing these audits, highly encourage you to be a member, but even if you're not a member, we have decided to leave a lot of our resources open for practitioners doing these engagements during the pandemic. So I would encourage you to check out our website. So
thank you so much, Mary. We
Sure.
appreciate the update. I know that was a lot to take in. One quick question. Can you please explain what SEFA stands for?
Yeah, that's the Schedule of Expenditures of Federal Awards.
We love our acronyms. Thank you so much.
Okay.
All right. So I am very excited to be able to introduce you to Alex Dorr. Alex is an optimist. He has a dream, a vision of a workplace where work is effortless, and I'm all in on that. Since 2015, he's been working with Cy Wakeman and a company called Reality-Based Leadership. So Alex has been doing a couple of sessions for us with firm leaders this year. I've learned so much from him, and I just wanted to have the opportunity to let you guys hear some of his thoughts around accountability, employee engagement, and his efforts to hardwire accountability into teams for success. So Alex is a graduate of the University of Derby in England. He is 6 feet 6 inches tall, which you cannot tell. But the reason I'm bringing that up is because I'm 5'1.5". And I think at some point we got to do something in person, Alex, just so we can get a picture of the two of us.
A good picture, absolutely.
So thank you for joining us, and let's jump right in so we can get into some of your key insights. One of the questions I had for you, it really is, just give us some of the basic concepts of reality-based leadership.
I love it. Thanks for having me. Yeah, reality-based leadership is really a modern leadership approach born from our research we've been doing for about 20 years. And our research is on a weird concept that is not involved in this profession at all, but it's drama in the workplace. And we actually found that the average person spends about 2 hours per day in drama. Now, these are people working hard. They're working long hours. I know what's going on for you guys, but at the same time, they're working hard with what we call a bit of a grudge. So they're getting things done, but at the same time, they're like, this is sick and wrong. This shouldn't be happening. Who dreamed up this new plan? And this is absolutely ridiculous. And they're venting, gossiping. That's some of the loud drama. But then there's silent drama that's resisting change, not being on board with the decisions of a firm or new processes. And so our philosophy, reality-based leadership, really gives practical tools for leaders to be able to recognize that human condition that leads to drama, depersonalize it, and then use a tool to just get us clear and move forward towards results for our clients. And so that's what we do. We really try and provide these tools. And what's key about this, lack of accountability is one of the sources of drama. One of the emerging sources of drama is our approach to engagement. One of the biggest things I've been getting from the profession is, with all of this competition and retention challenges, how do I retain my people? And how do we keep them engaged? And this over rotation on engagement that we're seeing, whether it's through our surveys or our approach to keeping people engaged, we've seen engagement without shared accountability through coaching actually creates entitlement. So we're helping to really balance that lever that we're seeing out there.
And so you talked about recruiting and retaining talent. That's a top issue for public accounting firms.
Yeah.
And we know it's a top issue for our business and industry people as well. But do you feel like building a culture of accountability can help in retaining?
Yeah, it's counterintuitive. It's counterintuitive because people say, well, Alex, I could coach people, I could love them up and then call them up to greatness, but then I can't afford to lose someone. And my response always shocks people. I go, unfortunately, the reality is you are losing someone. You're usually losing your best people. Now, let me explain. So the same workplace can't please a high accountable and a low accountable mindset at the same time. So we say in leadership, you're always going to be making one of those groups uncomfortable. It's our job to make sure we're making the right group uncomfortable. Now, unfortunately, if we over-rotate to treating everyone's comments, for example, on what would it take to stay engaged in the workplace, unfortunately, some of our people are in a lower state of accountability, and I'm not sure if their comments are actually going to help drive our business results. A lot of that turns into venting, what's wrong with the organization, what's wrong with the world. But the comments from our high accountables, I really want to take action on those. I want to turn the volume of those up, and I want to look at implementing those. Now, the problem is that when you implement ideas from high accountable mindsets, it's usually focused on the potential of your firm and the clients and what, they forego their preference for potential. If I'm in a high state of accountability, I want to get involved with that. I want to work in an environment that does that, low drama, high accountable, transparency. We call each other to greatness. We're really living in this environment. We don't resist change. High accountables thrive in that environment. Someone in a low state of accountability in their mindset, they're like, oh my gosh, that sounds really tough. I want to go somewhere else. So when you're looking at your leadership, it's all about energy management. Are your approaches pleasing your most resistant people that won't get on board with very much of anything? That's going to actually tick off your high accountables, so much so that they leave for other places that reward high accountable, visionary, low drama environments and behavior. So they go to our competition. So we're like, dang it, I'm losing our best people. That's what they're looking for so they can do great work. Unfortunately, someone in a low state of accountability wants to kind of sit and stay still and not grow. And that's the difference. So retention's counterintuitive, where you actually want to create this low drama, highly accountable environment that attracts other high accountables, because in all of the research, and a lot of our work's grounded in human behavior and psychology, a lot of the research, almost all of it, shows that this mindset drives both happiness and engagement and results. And another thing I'd say of the difference between a high and low accountable mindset, if you tie it to engagement. So when a high accountable is struggling with their reality, say at work, you say, what can we improve around here? And they're like, yeah, I'm kind of suffering at work. It's getting pretty hard. They'll first self-reflect, which is a key driver of accountability. They'll self-reflect and say, what's my part in this situation? What have I not, updated my skill set? Am I using an old approach? Am I lacking willingness right now? What do I need to step up to first? They reflect on that. And then what's left over, they report to the firm or the organization that this would be helpful if we could invest in this or do this. Someone in a low state of accountability, they'll say, dang, I'm suffering right now. It's kind of crazy right now. And they'll skip the self-reflection and immediately blame other people or their circumstances or the environment. And that's a big difference. So who do you want in your firm when you look at those two core mindsets? And so what we recommend for retention is work with the willing, your high accountables, amplify that behavior, and then hire in only high accountables. And then those in a low state of accountability, we got to call them up to greatness or work on performance management to maybe find them another place to go. So I hope that clarifies a bit about the retaining piece. It's an interesting approach.
It is. It's great insight. And we've been working with Alex, so we got some tools that can help kind of put these concepts into action. We want these downloadable tools for you. So we've got those listed there. We've got a couple more coming. But Alex, we're in this war for talent. We all switched to a remote overnight. How have you seen businesses change the way they're operating over the last 18 months in this remote environment?
I've seen some really incredible transitions. And what's interesting is just looking at the accountability levels and who's really thrived in this and who hasn't. But one thing I've noticed is one of the pieces that keeps us from going into a high state of accountability in our mindset is the ego. And the ego loves ambiguity. It loves verbal dialogue. It likes to talk about a lot of things, but not really put it on paper and make it visual. Because if we made it visual with a tool, we'd then get intentional and we could move forward with accountability and some action steps. So all of the tools I've partnered with the AI CPA, and they've done some amazing work on these, help us have these practical ways to start to bring some of our research to life through self-reflection. And actually, you can use them in one-on-one conversations or with your teams. So a quick example of a way to start naturally driving accountability in your teams, because it leads to happiness and results, is if someone comes up to you and they say, hey, do you have a minute? We actually researched this, and the typical hey, do you have a minute is the first thing we notice is people are liars. They usually need about 45 minutes of your time. And the typical topic when we looked at this was hearsay, speculation, things that never happened, things that could never happen, people not present. And the typical conclusion of that conversation, 45 minutes, was please don't do anything. I just wanted you to know, now I feel better. And when you look at the ROI of that times your average salary and benefits and hourly pay, this is an enormous opportunity when I talk about that 2.5 hours a day of drama. So one of our tools is actually called the S-bar. So when someone says, hey, do you got a minute to me? I go, I'm always here for you. Empathy, I'm approachable, but have you done an S-bar? And it's a simple template you guys can grab, SBAR. Imagine this. They pre-process the issue, and the S is the present situation, one sentence. Hard to get into a lot of the backstory, the judgment, the hearsay, when you just have to nail down what's the issue. The B is the relevant background for the situation. Now, what I found is some people think they work for the History Channel. They're like, oh, back in 1979, when this one thing happened, it's a 1 in a million chance. And so we make sure it's relevant to your guys' strategy or what you're trying to do as a firm. So they're tying it to alignment of the organization. The A is what's your analysis and what expertise, data, what's the research say, what's the new policy, what are some of the regulations, not your opinion, your gut feeling, what's some real bulk behind this? And then the R is really important. What are your recommendations? And they got to be plural. The ego wants to give either 0 recommendations. They're like, you're the leader, you get paid the big bucks, you figure it out. So they want to throw the issue onto you guys, which makes you more busy. And that's what leads to burnout. But the ego really likes to give 1 recommendation as well. The only way to do this is my way, my preference. What we want to get into is mental flexibility and potential. Give me 2 to 5 ways forward that you can think about, maybe the cost benefit of each of those actions. And then as a leader, they read that to you in 2 minutes. Very clear, it's on paper, it's beyond ego. And your job as a leader is to go, sounds like number 3 is good. Nice idea there. Can I count on you to go do that? So that really is one tool that drives all of our competencies of low drama in a conversation one-on-one. So that's one of the tools I would share for you guys. And just starting those SBARs is a great way to make this a template and operationalize all of our research we've done the last 20 years.
So thank you so much, Alex. That's a great reminder. I've given you the name of Alex's podcast. He goes through the concepts that we talked about in 10 minutes in much more detail in one of the episodes of his podcast. And I'd highly encourage you to listen to that. But within these resources, the page that I've linked you to, you'll get links to videos where Alex and Cy Wakeman talk about some of these ideas. I put a reminder on my calendar, like every 3 or 4 months, to go listen to that podcast again, just to refresh the concepts and to strengthen the discipline that it takes to kind of get this muscle built up within the organization. So thank you so much, Alex. Eric, turn it over.
Yeah, I just want to thank Alex and you for this session. I mean, this is what the town hall is all about. That was 11 minutes of gold, of real great information that we all need right now more than ever. I mean, you always need, management, organizational strategies. But what's happened over the past 18 months, as I talk to firm leaders and other leaders, is this over-rotating, and I like, how the lower accountables, parts of the organization that have been demanding, it can be more communication or drama issues. And I've spent an hour with Alex Dorr, and we've leveraged some of his materials at CPA.com, and we are leveraging them at the AICPA. So I think we're in a time right now with these employee transitions where the first instinct always is to say, well, what have we done wrong? And there's always good self-reflections. There's no reason not to self-reflect, but then to be very intentional about how you act. So, I mean, Alex, just a question on that, because you are seeing the great resignation occurring. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of positives in that. And then some companies, what happens is sometimes they're struggling, then they start struggling even more because all they start focusing on is engagement. And then before you know it, you're in financial trouble. And then you look at companies with purpose, and it's a completely different story.
Well, yeah, you nailed a couple things there. And what came to mind is, we have an engagement survey. I'm not selling this, but it's a way to see the data where we ask some questions around our factors of accountability. So they're an indicator to see if you're a high, medium, or low accountable. So imagine you get all those comments back on what would keep you engaged, or you can do this if you don't have a survey, you're just asking your teams. Well, we get to see all the comments, and we're like, before we do anything, let's filter that by accountability levels and see what the high accountables said. So we had an organization where 68% of the people did not trust senior leadership through these big changes. And they were going to send the leaders to trust camp, and they were going to bring in the speed of trust and spend hundreds of thousands of dollars on this training. And we said, before you do that, let's see what the high accountables said. And it was amazing. Over 94% of the high accountables did trust senior leadership's direction. So our question was, is it a trust issue, or was it a level of accountability challenge? And I'll leave that up for you guys to decide. So our recommendation, because senior leadership, what was going on in that firm, they had to change and pivot their business. They had some big initiatives going. They were calling people to greatness. And a lot of people in a low state of accountability won't trust that. But those that recognize that that's what we need to evolve and continue to serve our clients, they're all in. They're like, nice stuff. And so what I would say is early on, the accommodation was important. We didn't know what was going on with the virus. This got really, really tough. It's still tough. But then we got to make sure we wean people off all the accommodation, or you're going to be in this never ending cycle of what would it take for you guys to stay? They give you a huge list of terroristic demands. You run out and you try and fix the list, and you come back and say, we almost did it, or we did it. Are you guys going to stay? They go, actually, now that you ask again, I'd like a little bit more money. I'd like better circumstances. I'd like better communication. And the question needs to become, I love that first list. Here's a second sheet of paper. What are you willing to do to get that? I love that too, but I clear communication, I'd love that. But what would you be willing to do to get that? And I was working with an organization I'll never forget. They wanted better communication on change. And I had that first list up there. Second list, I asked the group, what would you be willing to do to get that? We had to take a break. There was so much silence. They're like, wait for it. I'll be here when it comes. When we came back, I found on the wall, it was their top 10 change initiatives printed out all over the organization. So I just read those out loud because that's what they wanted. I go, do these sound familiar? And they're like, how did you know that? And I go, because they're printed all over the organization and in the company podcast and in that email. So then someone raised their hand. They go, I suppose I could read the email announcements on the changes moving forward. So I wrote that on the second sheet of paper. I'm like, now we have shared accountability for the workplace we want to create. Now the third sheet of paper for me as a leader is how can I support that? And what we came up with is Mondays were bad days for those announcements, but Tuesdays were better. So now that we had shared accountability that the group would read the email, they've committed to that. Now I move it with the communications team to Tuesday, and now we're all engaged to these changes. But if I go from first list to third list, I'm just going on the runaround of trying to perfect circumstances. And it just becomes a never-ending game of trying to engage with the wrong things. That's why accountability, we found over and over, is the holy grail. It's the driver of engagement and results. And so that tool is also called Engaged Action Planning. AICPA has that for you. It's a great group facilitation tool.
That's a great. That's a good lead in, as Lisa said, to watch the podcast. A lot of good information. We're now moving to the open forum. And one thing I'll just say is, in this remote environment we're in, the high accountables matter even more, and the high performing teams matter more. It is harder. So it is harder. And the low accountables are going to create more drama in a remote environment than they would in a structured company environment. So we got lots coming in here. Lisa, I know you're looking at the live feed, and so let's just Lauren. I mean, here's an easy one. Who are the three people? A lot of good comments on kind of your civic governmental lesson there. They appreciated that, and they want to know who are the three people to watch.
So it's Wyden, Biden, and Neal. Wyden and Neal are the Democratic leaders of the tax writing committee, and obviously Biden is President Biden.
So, I mean, we got lots of questions regarding basis and guidance for S Corps related to reporting PPP loan forgiveness. Lisa?
Still waiting for guidance on that one, and I'm so glad someone put it into the Q&A because I meant to mention that. That is still one of the big unknowns. And our tax team will be working on sharing some insights on what to do when you don't have the guidance that you're looking for. I saw some questions in the Q&A about what to do if the lender still isn't accepting forgiveness applications. Some lenders are talking about getting their portals open and running around Labor Day, so 1st of September. I know that borrowers are getting anxious. But again, if it's a 2020 loan, go ahead and start working on the forgiveness application, factoring in PPP interplay versus ERC. If it's a 2021 loan, unless there's a real reason to get moving on it, so you got a merger acquisition to deal with, I think Eric and I would both advocate for just patience a little bit longer.
Mary, a great session as well. I'm not sure. There's a question coming in for for-profit company receive money under one program. Can they perform a program-specific audit?
Yeah, I mean, it depends on the program. If they're talking about the Provider Relief Fund, which my guess is that they are, a for-profit entity can get either a single audit or a GAGAS Yellow Book financial audit. So under single audit, program-specific audit is allowed as long as it's truly only one program that they're getting the money under. If they have multiple federal programs that they're getting money under from HHS in particular, as it relates to PRF, they couldn't do a program-specific audit.
All right. Well, thank you, Mary, Lauren, and Alex. You made this another power hour. So Lisa and I are just going to kind of review a couple of resources. Look forward to having all of you back on a future town hall.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you so much.
So here we go. We've got all the most recent town halls, and also we've got the special edition kind of segment that was done on ERC. Lisa?
Yep, just a reminder that we are continuing to update our PPP resources. So we've got the loan forgiveness calculators that you can be using, the summary of PPP. Lots of questions today about accounting for PPP forgiveness, when to record it. So I'll point you to the accounting for PPP videos that we have on that page there for you. Our MAP survey is one of the largest benchmarking surveys in the profession. We could really use about an hour of your time. You'll get amazing data back to help you compare how you're doing against your peer network. You can do that by geography and by revenue size, by line of service. So really great data in exchange for a little bit of your time.
And that brings us to the final slide here. So episodes, the upcoming town halls, September 2nd and the 30th. We don't have one on the 16th, a couple of reasons. September 15th, tax deadline, September 16th, a holiday. So we've got those next two coming up on September 2nd. We'll have Barry Melanson join us. We've got Carl Peterson, Carl's Corner, who will be with us. Lisa will be there. I'll be there. So it will be a great way to kick off September. We really enjoyed being with you. It was great being live with you a couple weeks ago and engaged. We've got over 7,000 people here on. So I know some of you have taken vacation. Maybe you're on vacation right now listening to the town hall. So Lisa, I'll let you sign off and say goodbye.
Thank you, everyone. We'll see you next time.
Thank you for your participation. You can now subscribe to the AICPA Town Hall series on your favorite podcast platform, as well as watch archives on YouTube and AICPA TV. Tune in for live broadcasts Thursdays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time.